Welcome everybody to our Meet the Social Entrepreneur webinar with Dr. Ness. Thank you for being here. We might just kick off straight away. People can join as they do. So Ness, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you've had a really busy morning. You're at the University of WA this morning, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Had a very interesting talk about climate change.
Oh, beautiful. We're going to get stuck right into that. So we have schools that are going to be joining live today, but also watching the recording, and they're on an entrepreneurial learning journey, a social entrepreneurial learning journey. They're at different points in the journey, but they're all wondering how to be successful social entrepreneurs, how to make money for their cause and their mission. So we're gonna pick your brain a little bit today, hopefully, and just find out a little bit about you're doing it in the real world and how you're going with it. So just by way of introduction, before you get into it, for everyone else, Ness is a passionate entrepreneur, researcher, author, and public speaker who's dedicated her life to climate change. And you're also a founding member of the Council of Social Enterprise, the Social Enterprise Council WA, right? WASEC.
Yeah, that's correct.
So heavily involved in social enterprise in Western Australia, hailing from Victoria though, so originally in Victoria. So Ness, I might just throw to you now just to give us maybe just a bit about your own journey, like where you've come from, where it all started, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. So, well, depending on how far back we want to go, when I was at school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I took a year off after high school, and then went off to do a fantastic university degree in Bendigo, which is called nature tourism, which is actually where I met Tom. And yes, that was in Bendigo. After that, I actually moved over to Europe, and I ended up doing my master's there. It was a Master's of Science in Environment and Resource Management, specialising in energy studies. And then I lived in Europe for a couple of years before moving back to Australia, around 2008. And I got offered to do my PhD over in WA. So PhD is a Doctor of Philosophy. So I am a doctor now, but I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a philosophical doctor. And that was on the topic of decarbonising cities and regions. And so I sort of ended up falling into academia for a while. I finished my PhD and then ended up lecturing and doing research and supervising other students on various sort of sustainability and climate related research projects. And but it was also I guess during my PhD and during my time at the university that I started becoming quite passionate about entrepreneurship and innovation as well. And my university was I was very lucky and fortunate that my university offered a whole bunch of different incubator and accelerator programs, which is where I learned a lot on that. And then I ended up starting my startup Climate Clever in 2018, and in 2019 we got our first investment, which is when I left the university and dived head first into the startup to do this full time. And so it's been going for about 4 years now. But as Tom mentioned, I sit on the board of WASEC, West Australian Social Enterprise Council, and right from the start, started my academic career, I should say. I've been very passionate about social enterprises and profit for purpose, and making sure that business is doing good as well as being profitable.
So it is an interesting kind of journey for you. So because you were in a university, full-time job, being a doctor and a lecturer and all those sort of things, and you actually decided that the entrepreneurial sort of journey was more for you. Was that something that was hard to do? It was move away from like a paycheck into like a
uncertainty
startup?
Look, it was, and certainly over the sort of the 10 years where I was dipping my toes into entrepreneurship, I had a lot of people offering advice and saying, oh, you just got to take the plunge and just quit the full-time job, no matter what you were doing. But it's a scary leap, because like I said, you sort of have a full-time paycheck and then all of a sudden you don't. And if you don't have a partner that's supporting you financially, sometimes you just can't do that. You actually do have to pay the bills and stuff. So for my journey, it was everyone's journey is unique, but for me it worked really well because I could sort of start my startup while I was at the university, and so I could keep bringing in my income, and it was great because it was research linked with my business. So I was basically doing pilots and documenting it through the research, but sort of running it through my company and having, employing people to help deliver that pilot. So it worked really well for me in that sense. But yeah, it's always scary, but I think at the end of the day, you do have to sort of take that leap of faith.
That's right. And I suppose for you, and maybe not unlike some of our students, you took that leap, but you'd already kind of been doing it alongside what you're otherwise doing. And that's sort of for a lot of our students too, they're doing this inside of school. So at least, it's not their every dollar they've ever earned, they're putting on the line. They kind of get the chance to practice. Now, I will say we do have a few schools online. So if any of our schools want to put a question in the Q&A or the chat, I'll be checking that as we go. So feel free to chuck a question in there if you're interested. I do have a few questions banked up here, Ness, that have come from schools and myself. So I'm going to launch into those. Would you be able to just give us a bit of a idea of your trading activity? So what is it that your business does?
Yeah, sure. So we have a business that's referred to as a SaaS business, so it's software as a service. So we've basically developed an app or online platform that helps schools. So all of you guys can jump online as well and look it up and join. So schools, households, and now businesses as well, and to help those schools, homes, and businesses to accurately measure their carbon footprint and look at, you can find actions that you can do to reduce your carbon footprint, and you can even go carbon neutral through the platform as well. So that's what we're selling. That's our trading sort of our core revenue is through an annual subscription. So each of those, well, actually homes is free now, but schools and businesses can pay an annual subscription. If they want to report, they can also actually sign up for free. So like a lot of software companies, there's often a free tier, and then you have paid services on top of that.
And so a lot of our schools are really keen. So, this is kind of a plea to them too to check out Climate Clever, because they are keen environmental schools doing their bit for sustainability. So, just from my point of view as well, definitely check out Climate Clever. Is that just climateclever.com.au?
Oh no, it's actually climateclever.org.
Okay.
.org. But I was just on that note, that was one of our, so when we started Climate Clever, and I'm sure you probably have a question on this later, but when we launched it formally in 2018, it was right around the same time that Greta Thunberg, which I'm sure all of you have heard about, the student climate activist, when she really started doing her rallying and strikes, and that created that whole global movement of students, around the world striking for climate action. And it was really good timing for us, because while it's horrible that it took students, to take to the streets to get people to change their perceptions and realize that this is a really critical issue, it was sad that it was on the students, and a lot of students were feeling very, disempowered. We're too young to make a change. We need the politicians to take action, which we do. We definitely do. And thankfully now we have got a change in government, and we have got some stronger climate policies and targets now in place. But the great thing about our platform was that it was designed to sort of empower, particularly students and schools, to say, you can actually do your own bit. You can help your school to reduce your school's emissions. You can go home and you can try and reduce your home emissions as well. So it was all about, empowering everyone to realize that we all make a difference, and we all have to, step up and contribute.
Yeah, and the Climate Clever app is that students get involved. They do some of the reporting, and they do some of the actual entering the information. Absolutely.
So we would highly encourage schools that do get involved. I mean, certainly sometimes it's the business managers that might be entering the bill data, but in many schools, they hand that over to the students, so the students can actually look at all the electricity bills and the water bills and help to input that data into the app, because we need it. Ultimately, you need the consumption of how many kiloliters of water the school's consuming, how many kilowatt hours of electricity, and all that sort of data. It's really important for everyone to understand that these are all resources that we're consuming that do have emissions attached to them. So they can enter that data, and they can. When we get really excited is when students get involved in actually identifying and implementing some of those carbon reduction actions and opportunities in the school as well. So things from behaviour change programs to maybe in some of the high schools you might do a solar feasibility study to see how much would it cost, and how much would it save the school buddies. Sorry, that's very unfortunate.
Someone's cleaning something.
I might just move. Keep going.
That's all right. No, and then so in terms of the social enterprise element of your business, that's your trading arm. And then obviously the mission and cause is around climate change, but how do you actually realize that mission, or what do you do in your social enterprise?
Yeah, so
we've lost you there, Ness. If you can still hear us, you're frozen. If I'm still moving, but Ness is frozen, it's not your internet schools. It's the
address.
Oh, there we go.
Are you still there?
Oh, now we can see you. Now we can see you and you're moving.
Okay. All right. I'll see you. Yeah. So I'll just say our core mission is to make climate action affordable and accessible for everyone. And the key part of our impact is actually the carbon emissions reduced and saved. So that's a core part of being a social enterprise, is that we are creating impact. But another aspect of that of our impact is we have built into our shareholders agreement that will give 10% of our profit back to helping disadvantaged communities to also implement low carbon technologies. Yep.
So I'll in terms of our schools program, they often do product redistribution. So, and we sort of say for the schools program, they're giving 100% of their profit. So for you guys, and I'm just saying this to make it make sense for some of the students, you've got some profit redistribution, but a big part of what you do is actually providing that service. So you forego profits so that you can provide the service to the community that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Sorry, right? I've got, yeah, no, that's correct. I'm just trying to mute myself. It's so noisy. I'm so sorry about this.
That's all right. This is the cost that we pay for getting such a high-powered social entrepreneur. You're busy.
I was going to say, this is life of an entrepreneur. You're constantly on the move.
That's right, and that's exactly what we came to see. So no, don't apologise for a second. It's good. So yeah, does that make sense? Like, that's what you're providing, a service, foregoing profits to provide the service, and you're doing some of that profit redistribution as part of it.
Yeah, so we're not necessarily foregoing profit. I mean, a big part of the social enterprise is the fact that you're being financially sustainable, so you are sustaining your own business. But yeah, being able to redistribute some of those profits back to helping, yeah, is often a key part of social enterprises, but not all social. I mean, some social enterprises, literally their core, what they're delivering, which is similar to what we're doing, is their primary reason for being a social enterprise. So it's sort of an optional extra when you want to give back and redistribute some of their profit. Some will give 50% of their profit, some will give 100% of their profit back to causes, charitable causes and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, great. And we had a few questions coming in from schools about ideation, coming up with ideas and how to be creative, but also ideas that kind of work. Can you talk a little bit about where that came from? Like, where did obviously you're solving climate change, that's the big level problem, but where did your niche sort of business idea come from? Yeah, so
I think the really interesting thing about I guess, starting businesses and ideation is really starting from something. A lot of good businesses have started from addressing a problem that they have seen themselves, and that's certainly the case for me. It was actually when I was doing my PhD that I was asked to help a local high school become carbon neutral. They were already on a bit of a journey towards that, but they got to a point where they're like, yep, we're ready to go. We'd like to actually become certified carbon neutral. And so that's, I came in on board came on and helped them with one of my colleagues, and we got them officially certified as the first carbon neutral school in Australia, and that was back in 2012. It was such a big achievement that Prime Minister Julia Gillard, who many of you probably don't know, that was one of our many previous politicians, prime ministers, and she came and celebrated that achievement with us, because it was such a most of the companies that were going carbon neutral at the time were like Qantas and big companies. So it was really great to sort of see a small organisation like a school being able to step up and say, hey, we're certified as well. But that whole process was the problem for me, because I was like, this was so complicated. It took us 9 months. We were using Excel spreadsheets and we were going backwards and forwards with the federal government, and it was just, really complex carbon accounting. And I thought, well, there's some great outcomes for this school. And they actually went on to save hundreds of thousands of dollars on their utility bills because they implemented all these energy efficiency and water efficiency things around their school. They, educated the students on the way, brought them, really educated about climate change and sustainability and resource efficiency. And the kids actually went home and actually influenced their parents. So the community was influenced and engaged around it as well. But I just thought, but this is but no, it's not scalable, and more schools aren't going to do this because of how complex it was. So that was sort of the initial inspiration and idea for Climate Clever. Was like, what if it was just like a platform where all that complexity was hidden, and all the students or the teachers or the users, whoever they were, could just input the data and and focus on the actions, which is the most important part, because we can measure all we want, but we actually have to do things to reduce. If they could just focus on that, then that's going to allow this process to be accessible by so many more schools. So that was my journey into finding the idea. And I think what we do run the risk of is we always often see with entrepreneurs is that they have a solution trying to find a problem. And so you really need to make sure that you've got a clearly articulated problem, whether it's something you've experienced yourself or whether it's something that someone else has talk to you about, but I find that that's often the best way to find to have a good idea is it's based in reality. It's something that is an issue.
So a take home, correct me if I'm wrong, but a take home for the students might be, how can we make something that people sort of want to do or have simpler? Like how can we you've taken this big complex thing and said, what if we could make it really simple, then people would buy it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want to be able to make sure it's scalable, whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that you can scale that up and do it lots of times. For example, what we did with that school was we were using Excel spreadsheets, and then what we ultimately did, and this might have been I might be preempting a question, but we after we did that with one school, we ran a pilot with 15 schools, but we didn't have enough money to do a fancy app like we have now. So we ended up running a pilot. This is often referred to as a MVP. I don't know if you guys have talked about that, but minimal viable product.
Yep.
Yeah. And so for us, that was, again, just using Excel spreadsheets, but sort of creating a template for the school so they didn't have to start from scratch. So we gave them all a template Excel spreadsheet. We gave them all these ideas for actions using Google Docs. If anyone's used Google Docs, it means that we can both see what's being written in there. And so we did that across the 15 schools. Just to sort of test out how these activities would go. And that was a 2-year pilot. And that was so successful that we were like, okay, we're onto something now. But that was an example of something that wasn't scalable. We couldn't now work with 200 schools with Excel spreadsheets and Google Docs. So that was when we really had to make sure that we had a solution to that problem that was going to be able to be done across hundreds of thousands of schools.
Yeah.
Platform
And it's great. I mean, it's amazing to hear how that looks at a really sophisticated business level. Like that's kind of a crazy tech business. And I suppose I'm just looking to just sort of reduce it down now, because there's two things there for me. One is when you looked at your enterprise side of things, you started with a problem and you sort of were looking at how can we make this simple for people? And if we do that, they'll pay for it. So that for our students kind of looking at our business ideas and stuff, it's not just what people can have and hold and take away. It's also what can you do for them to make their life a bit simple that they'll, that they want to do otherwise, but maybe they don't because it's so complex. And then the second part of what you said I really like, because I think that really talks to around what we kind of have as our prototyping stage, where you develop the product how you think it's going to work, but you definitely don't lock it in, because one of the things you mentioned was, are you going to be able to replicate this, many times? So every school, and in your example, it's sort of like imagine going through and doing what you did with that very first school that became carbon neutral, trying to do that every time. It just wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be, it wouldn't make a profit, all those sort of things. So the prototype.
Or you'd have to charge, sorry,
yeah.
I was going to say, or you'd have to charge that, a ridiculous fee for that product, because, ultimately that might have been $20,000 worth of work that we did for that school, and they're not going to be willing to pay for that. So that's sort of the way, the trade-off that you have to figure out.
Yeah, and our schools are on a bit more of a timeline, so they do it a bit quicker. So they're sort of making decisions quite quickly, and they need to see
Perfect.
They need to see the direction they're moving in quite quickly. So, but I think those two things are really, considering what problem you're solving from the perspective of making people's lives simpler. I mean, maybe they'll get an idea out of that, but maybe they won't. But it's a great way to look at it. And then secondly, at the prototyping stage, just looking at it from the perspective of how do we scale this? How do we replicate it? Lots of times for as little input as we can, the sort of minimal viable product sort of sense.
But so on that note though, Tom, I would just say as well, it's a really important thing to realize that when you are prototyping, which is essentially creating your MVP, realizing that it doesn't have to be perfect. It really is about testing your idea. So I think a lot of the time people think that they have to go straight into the big fancy product, and you really can be as simple as you can and basic, knowing that you are aiming for it to be replicable, but you can test it out in a really low cost way. Like for us, that was no cost. It was using Excel spreadsheets and Google Docs. So, but it still sort of served the same purpose. And you might know where the end goal is, but knowing that you can get started really simply.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, people, won't say just students, probably adults as well, but they get caught on that prototyping, trying to make the prototype perfect, like spending loads of time on this one thing and then asking people, is it working? And that's a secondary thing that they'd spend less time on, whereas almost is what you're saying, like you almost have to reverse that and kind of spend a bit of time on the prototype, but then get it in front of people and try and test, see how quick it is to put out there and how easy it is to replicate and all those sort of questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. We're almost out of time, believe it or not. That went really, really quick. But I do want to ask you, what advice would you give to budding social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, whether they're at school or in the business world? There's a question without notice for you.
So one, I would say something I've certainly learned over the many years of participating in lots of ideation and incubator programs and everything is do market research. So you might come up with what you think is a brilliant idea, but then making sure that you do a really good Google search to make sure that hundreds of other people haven't come up with the same thing. That often does reveal that you've got lots of like a crowded marketplace, so lots of other people are already doing that, so it's going to be really hard for you to get your idea out there if you're competing with lots of different companies that are already doing that. And the other thing I'd just be saying is it's entrepreneurship on its own, that's really exciting, but having like social entrepreneurship and knowing or environmental, knowing that you're actually building something that's going to have a positive impact on the world is it's such a worthwhile and fulfilling and rewarding endeavor. And I think at the end of the day, and I know this might not be your be all and end all career what you're doing, but it is really important that you are passionate about what you're doing. And because the worst thing is if you're just in a mundane job which you hate. So being able to do something that's that you feel very passionate about is just a luxury and a very exciting thing. So well done to all of you for going on this journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. Thanks for your time. And on behalf of all our schools and all the schools watching this in the future, big thanks and thank you for being part of, I suppose, the growing social enterprise, culture in Australia, what's happening now all the way over to the West Coast. So, we'll leave it there, but thank you so much and see you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
And sign up to Climate Clever.
Sign up to Climate Clever, climateclever.org.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, see you next. Bye.
See you.